So good morning, everyone. And as you probably know, Venerable Chodron is on a teaching tour in Asia. So I'm filling in for her and very happy to have the chance to do this talk this morning. So you've already done a meditation and your mind is probably quite relaxed. But let's just take a few minutes to renew or refresh the positive, compassionate motivation that we developed earlier. So really do your best to bring into your mind, into your heart, the feeling of caring about others, about all living beings, if that's possible for you, and feeling the wish to benefit them as much as you can. And then feel the wish to use this session, this talk, as a way to develop your positive qualities, your abilities, so that you can be more beneficial to others now and going forward. So I'm sure all of you have been very concerned about Geshe-la and also about the community. And we really appreciate your concern and all the support that you have given. We've received many messages of support, people saying they're praying and getting friends and family to pray as well. And many people have come here to offer service and make offerings of food and so on. So all of that has been very helpful and very encouraging. And you've probably also been wondering what's actually been going on. And Venerables Chunyi and Thubten gave a BBC on Friday, was it Friday? In which they explained kind of the timeline of events and different things that have been done to attempt to find Geshe-la. So if you haven't already watched that BBC, then I encourage you to do so when you go home. That will fill you in on what's been done so far. And those of us who are living here have been involved as well. Many people have gone out with the search parties and also on their own continuing to search the area. And those who have some difficulty walking around in the forest have been staying here and cooking, answering the phone, greeting visitors, and so on. Also, we've been continuing our usual routine morning and evening prayers and meditations, and the usual activities to keep the Abbey running and plan for our future events and so on. So I think having the normality of our monastic life continue has been helpful to stay calm and also to feel useful. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's not the case that we've been sitting around, feeling sad and anxious and crying, biting our nails, pulling out our hair, which isn't there anyway. So, yeah, so I think you can see that we're doing okay. Yeah, we're managing. And I think the main reason for that is because of the Dharma. The Dharma has so many very wonderful tools, strategies to work with our mind, to work with emotions, thoughts that can sometimes get out of control and get us into a state of anxiety or frenzy or sadness and so on. And so we've been using these, individually, each person processing their thoughts and their emotions using Dharma methods, and also collectively talking with each other and helping each other out with that. So the Dharma is really, really so helpful in situations like that, like this. And also there's lots of methods in the Dharma for what is called transforming adversities into the path, or transforming problems into the path. So the idea behind that is, when we face difficulties in our life, which we do again and again and again, everybody has problems in life. But problems don't have to be bad. They don't have to be things that get us down and make us upset. And it all depends on our mind. It depends on how we look at the situation, how we work with the situation, how we work with our own mind, our own thoughts and feelings. And so in the teachings in particular, I think this kind of teaching is mainly found in the Mahayana Buddhism, in the teachings on the Bodhisattva's path, how to cultivate bodhicitta and follow the path to enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So there's this whole body of teachings called transforming adversities into the path, transforming problems into the path. And so the idea is, with wisdom and skill and using these methods, we can utilize problems to develop, to increase our positive qualities, such as compassion and wisdom, and also to decrease our self-centeredness, our ego, our other afflicted states of mind, attachment, aversion, and so forth. And so we've also had some advice from teachers, and they've encouraged us to recall just the nature of samsara. Samsara is also translated as cyclic existence. This is the situation we are all in as unenlightened beings. As long as we're not enlightened, as long as we haven't reached enlightenment or awakening or nirvana, we're still in this situation called samsara. And samsara is characterized by problems, dukkha, which is sometimes translated as suffering or unsatisfactoriness. So there's numerous types of dukkha, problems in samsara that we encounter again and again and again and again. And that's just the nature of unenlightened existence. And it's important for us, in fact, it's crucial for us to recognize this, to recognize that as long as we're not enlightened, as long as we haven't freed ourselves from samsara, we will keep running into problems again and again and again. It's like a cycle, There's times when, things are going well and we're happy, there's no big problems. But then sooner or later, bam, you run into another problem. So this is just the nature of samsara. And so the Buddha and all the great Buddhist masters from his time until the present, again and again encourage us to contemplate the nature of samsara, all the different types of dukkha, suffering, problems, because doing so energizes us to get out, to do what needs to be done, to free ourselves from this situation and then help others do the same. And when things are going well, when we're not facing any big problems, it's easy to become sort of complacent and not have such a strong determination to get ourselves out of samsara. But then when we do face problems, that's like a reminder. It's like we're being, it's being thrown in our face that, yeah, things are not great. And we need to do things to get ourselves out of this situation and then help others to do the same. So last Friday morning, one of our teachers, Geshe Yeshe Tapke, who's been here a couple of times in the past, but now he doesn't travel. He's 96 years old. And so a little hard to travel, but he's still teaching, and his mind is incredibly sharp and clear, and he can quote from memory all these verses, all these passages from the scriptures. And he's been living in Houston for the last couple of years, and we've been able to get teachings from him online. He's a wonderful teacher. And so he offered to give us a talk by Zoom. So we had this little teaching Friday morning from Geshe Yeshe Tapke. And he gave us lots of advice on how to use this situation skillfully and avoid getting upset and despondent. So just one example of something he mentioned, he quoted from a text, one of the Buddhist teachings in the Vinaya, where the Buddha said that we shouldn't become despondent in the face of negative experiences in samsara. Rather, these are due to our own past actions, unskillful actions, negative karma, you might say, that we created in the past. So this is one of the aspects of samsara. We're in samsara because we still have afflictions in our mind. We have these disturbing states of mind like ignorance, greed, hatred, and so on. There's a long list of these states of mind, and that we didn't choose to be this way. It's just left over from previous lives. They've been in our mind forever, and we haven't done what needs to be done to get rid of them. So they're still in our mind, and they motivate us to act in ways that are unwise and unskillful, like 10 non-virtuous actions. And then those actions leave imprints in our mind, which become the cause for us to experience problems. So all the problems that we have in our life are the result of our own afflictions and karma. And that's, the bad news. But the good news is that we can free ourselves from this. It's not a permanent situation. So afflictions and karma are transitory phenomena. They're not permanent fixtures, but they are transitory. They come and go, and there are antidotes to them. There are things you can do to clear them away and get rid of them. So that's our job as followers of the Buddha, is to work on our mind and free our mind from these causes of suffering. So then when problems happen, this is like a teaching, reminder that, we're not free from suffering, we're not free from samsara, from the causes of suffering, afflictions, and karma. So we have to work on those. And he said we should also avoid getting excited about, enthralled by, attached to the beautiful, pleasant aspects of samsara, because, I mean, they do exist. Of course, there's a lot of nice experiences, a lot of beautiful things, but they're not permanent. They don't last. They're a bit like dreams or rainbows or, things that are there one moment and gone the next. And getting attached to them just leads to disappointment. So these are some of the thoughts we need to cultivate with regard to samsara. And he quoted from this teaching of the Buddha. This is kind of a famous quote, which says, "Whatever is born will die. What has been gathered will be dispersed. What has been accumulated will be exhausted or run out. What has been built up will collapse. And what has been high will be brought low." So the Buddha, in many places in his teachings, advised us to contemplate impermanence, how things are subject to change, they don't last. And that can be a little depressing when we first start thinking about it. Yeah, we want the pleasant things to last. Of course, we don't want the bad things to last. We want them to disappear as quickly as possible. But with the pleasant things, the beautiful things, we want them to last. And in fact, we want them to be there continuously forever, and never change and never go away. And that's simply not the way things are. That's not the reality of things. As we all know, we've all had plenty of experiences in our life of losing loved ones, losing friends, losing cherished possessions, losing our youth, our health, our energy as we get older, and so on. So we have plenty of experiences of that, but we need to keep that in mind and use that to help us avoid being attached to the pleasant things, expecting that they will last and never change, never go away. And impermanence also helps with the unpleasant things because they don't last either. That's the good side. Yeah, so whatever problem happens, I can see this in myself, and I think it's probably quite typical, when we face some problem, whether it's something internal, like feeling depressed or feeling, grumpy, or some external situation that we don't like. There's this tendency to think it's going to be like that forever. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, like, oh no, it's going to be like this forever. It's never going to change. It's never going to go away. And that's just not true. If we think it's like that, that's going to increase our suffering, our unhappiness. Because then the situation just seems so huge and heavy and weighing us down. We're buried under it. But if we remember impermanence, and that's not so difficult to do because we can recall previous experiences that we've had that were unpleasant, or previous experiences of being depressed, and then ask ourselves, well, how long did that last? It may have been a few hours or a few days or maybe a few weeks, but eventually it changed. It went away. So we can see that for our own experience that, things don't last. Both the good things, and that helps us not get attached to the good things, but also the bad things. And that helps us to take them more lightly and not be so upset about them. They will change too. So, it was really wonderful to have that teaching from Geshe Yeshe Tapke. It's also been wonderful to have Gala Rinpoche here. I don't know if you've met him. Is he here? No. He's around somewhere. He came a week ago. He's a friend of Geshe-la's who's staying in the Drepung Loseling Monastery in Houston. And he flew out here to help with everything. He's been extremely helpful, helping with going out on the searches, but also he's been doing pujas every day, I think, in front of the picture of the Dalai Lama. And this morning he did this very special puja, which is why there's all these beautiful offerings. It was a puja to clear away negative energy, purify, negative karma, negative energy, and also clear away obstacles. So that was very uplifting. So I think you can see that we're doing okay in spite of this difficult situation, and we're still hopeful and optimistic, not giving up hope that Geshe-la will be found and come back, be our teacher. Okay, so let's continue with this book. Last month, Venerable Chodron went through chapter 62, and today we'll do chapter 63. It's actually very short. It's only 2 pages. So we'll have time for questions afterwards. So this, I don't know if anyone's here for the first time, but there's this book called An Open-Hearted Life, written by Venerable Chodron and Russell Kolts, who's a Western psychologist specializing in this type of therapy called compassion-focused therapy. So the book is a kind of collaborative effort between, Buddhist teacher and a Western psychologist about how to cultivate compassion. It's full of lots of wonderful pieces of advice and ways of practice and so on. So this chapter 63, is called Compassion as the Antidote to the Critical Judgmental Mind. Does anyone have a problem with that? Anyone not have a problem with that? I think it's pretty common. Okay, it says, and this particular chapter was written by Venerable Chodron. You can tell there's a little, different chapters start with an insignia. So if there's a Dharma wheel at the beginning, that's that was written by her. And then there's this other sign. What is this sign? It's a Greek letter. Psi. Yeah. So that's a symbol of Western psychology. That was written by Russell. Okay, so she starts saying, many people suffer from having a hypercritical attitude towards themselves and others. When aimed at ourselves, this attitude results in low self-esteem, as discussed above. So the previous chapter, chapter 62, was about that. It's called Compassion as an Antidote to Low Self-Esteem. So if you have a problem with that, if you suffer from low self-esteem and you didn't attend last month's talk, you might want to look that up online. I'm sure it would contain a lot of useful advice. So when targeted at others, so when we have this critical attitude towards others, it damages relationships and generally leaves us feeling rotten. Yeah. So if we think back in our life, in our experiences, in our relationships with others, then has it ever happened that having an overly critical, fault-finding mind has caused damage in a relationship? Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we probably all had that experience. And then causing us to feel rotten. I mean, maybe when we're in the middle of that type of attitude of being critical, finding faults in others, maybe we don't notice it so much. But afterwards, when we look back on what was going on in our mind or what was coming out of our mouth, then do we sort of feel good about ourselves? Do we feel, oh, I'm really proud of myself. I did good there. I want to do that again and again. Probably not. Okay, so then it goes on. When we look at how the critical, judgmental mind operates, we see that it is trying to make us happy. I was surprised when I read that, But then I thought, well, actually, like, Buddhism says again and again, we're all trying to be happy. This is a basic motivation that everyone, even animals, every living being, wants to be happy, wants to feel good, and wants to avoid suffering and problems. So that's kind of like the underlying motivation for everything we do. Everything we do is really some attempt to be happy, to feel good, and to avoid being unhappy and feeling lousy. So that's what's there in our mind, motivating our actions. But our mind sometimes gets things very wrong. So, we see things in distorted ways. And so often the things that we do, even though it's an attempt to find happiness and to feel good, but it's not very wise or skillful. And in fact, the things that we do often just increase our unhappiness and our suffering and our problems. This is, again, one of the big problems in samsara. We're all trying to be happy. And according to Buddhism, we should be happy. We deserve to be happy. Nobody should have to suffer. But why we do suffer and why we often fail to have happiness is because of confusion. We're just confused. We keep doing the wrong things again and again and again. Like that expression, shooting ourselves in the foot. I don't know where that comes from, but anyway, it's like, self-sabotage. But it's because we just don't know. We just don't understand what really does bring happiness and what we need to do to stop our suffering. So most of us are just in a state of confusion, bewilderment. Okay, so then she goes on to say, one of my children's teachers, Geshe Ngowan Darge, said, we'll gossip with a friend, criticizing this person and that person, until at the end of the conversation, we come to the conclusion that the two of us are the best people in the world. Have you ever done that? The critical mind thinks that by disparaging others, we will make ourselves better than them. Yeah? So, it does make sense. I mean, we probably don't feel completely great about ourselves. We're probably very much aware of faults and mistakes and shortcomings in ourselves. But then when we look around at other people, we see, oh, this person is even worse than me. I don't have that fault, and I don't have that fault, and so on. So it is, it is kind of a deluded attempt to feel good about ourselves. Okay, I'm bad, but I'm not as bad as other people. So then there's a little bit of feeling uplifted there. But is that real happiness? Is that a genuine sense of happiness and well-being and feeling good about yourself? Okay, then she says, sometimes we'll sit in a public place and people watch, commenting on the appearances of strangers. Why does that person have such a weird haircut? Oh, that person is such a slob. That one is too fat. That one is too thin. Oh, there's someone who looks rich and important. He's probably conceited beyond belief. She's pretty, but most likely is a spoiled brat. That one can't stand up straight. He's undoubtedly drunk. This one is angry. Look at how she's screaming at those kids. However, doling out criticism does not make us feel good about ourselves. Our respect for ourselves diminishes after witnessing the ugly torrent of negative comments about others. Is that true? Again, it's like maybe at the time when we're involved in this kind of barrage of critical thoughts about other people, finding faults in other people, there may be a little bit of satisfaction, feeling good. But afterwards, when we really look at what was going on in our mind, think about what was going on in our mind, do we really feel good about that? So it's good to pay attention to that, to the fact that that kind of thought or words, if they actually come out of our mouth, doesn't really feel good. So that then we'll have the energy to do something about it, to change it. And it is possible. Yeah. I'm someone who is very, very critical. And so this, I can really relate to this. And I remember when I first went to, I was, back in the 70s, I went to India and spent time in Dharamsala and then later in Nepal at Kopan Monastery. And I think it was during my first longish retreat after I got ordained. And I was reading a book. I think it was actually a book by this teacher, Geshe-Ngo Andargi. He was also my first teacher. He was the teacher at the Tibetan Library in Dharamsala. And I came across something in that book that just really shocked me. He said something like, we wouldn't see faults in other people if we didn't have faults in ourselves. And I was like, huh? And I think he gave an example, if I can remember correctly. He said, for example, if you see somebody walking up to a plate of fruit and then choosing a nice piece of fruit rather than a rotten piece of fruit, and in your mind you might think, oh, how greedy they are, how selfish they are. They're taking the nice fruit and leaving the rotten fruit for somebody else. So, and then he said, we only have that kind of thought because we're greedy ourselves. So the faults we see in other people are actually faults that we have in ourselves. And that really shocked me because I was very much aware of my fault-finding mind. It was just operating almost nonstop, especially my neighbor. I mean, I was living in this little row of rooms, tiny little rooms, and the person next to me was somebody that I often got very annoyed at. And I had lots of criticalness towards. And so then I thought, so does that mean all those faults that I find in other people are faults that I have as well? And that was really shocking. But I started checking. I started investigating that. And what I have found both back then and also since then, although I don't always do it, but when I do see a fault in somebody else, and then I look back at myself and say, do I have that fault? I always find it. Yeah. And that's painful. Yeah. It's really painful. But then on the other hand, this whole path, the Buddhist path, is all about transforming ourselves, working on ourselves to overcome our faults, our mistakes, the negative aspects of ourself. And we can't just get rid of them right away, although we'd like to, but it takes time to unlearn those habits, change those habits, and learn new positive habits, good qualities. So it's a process of transformation of ourselves, our mind, our way of being. And so we have to recognize the faults that we have. If we're blind to them, then we won't do what needs to be done to change them. It's very, I remember, I think some other teacher said, it's so easy to see the faults of others, but when it comes to our own faults, then it's very difficult to recognize those. One reason is because we live with ourselves all the time, but another is it's just really hard. It's not easy to recognize and acknowledge your own greed and anger and impatience and arrogance and so on and so forth. It's painful. But again, if we can recognize how important that is, how essential that is, if I don't recognize those faults in myself, they'll just continue. I'll just continue behaving that way, being that way, and won't change. So in a way, then, seeing the faults in somebody else, if you use that skillfully, you can say, oh, that's showing me something about myself that I need to work on. And how to work on it is to, first of all, accept it. To accept that I have that in myself. That is a part of me. And that's not easy to do. Yeah, it's not easy to accept things because maybe our whole life, years and years and years, we have been denying and suppressing that particular thing. And so to change that attitude and accept that is there, that is part of me, is hard. We're going against many years of habit. But another reason it may be hard is because we may tend to think, I'm like that permanently, almost like that's a permanent feature in myself and it cannot be changed. That is not true. According to Buddhism, it's possible to be free of every single fault that we have, every single negativity that's there. Nothing is fixed and permanent in our mind because of the nature of our mind. I say the nature of our mind is like the sky. Clear, well, not today, but yesterday morning, it was quite nice. When the sky is completely free of clouds and pollution and just totally pristine. Our mind has a similar nature. Its real nature is clear and pure. And then the things like greed, hatred, ignorance, pride, selfishness, and so on, those faults, those are like clouds. They come and go. They're not permanent. And we can actually see that for ourselves. If we watch our mind, pay attention to our mind, we can see, there's times when I'm angry and I'm grumpy and I'm irritated and I'm not nice to others, but I'm not always like that. Sometimes I'm patient and kind and friendly and loving towards others. So we can see, these faults come and go. They're not permanent. And then there's methods. There's all kinds of methods in Buddhist teachings for overcoming these negative or disturbing states of mind. And if we use them, they will gradually decrease and eventually go away altogether. I can say that with confidence. I can really see how I have changed a lot. My mind has changed a lot through working with these teachings and these methods. I don't know how, that was kind of a digression there. But anyway, so there is something useful about this habit of seeing faults, being critical and fault finding. If you use that, that can help you understand yourself better, see things in yourself that need to be worked on. But this chapter is about using compassion. So it goes on to say, compassion is a great antidote to a critical, judgmental mind. When we have compassion, we look at others with kindness, understanding their difficulties, knowing that they're doing the best they can, given the external situation and their internal abilities to deal with it. Being compassionate entails understanding that people are usually unaware of how they have been influenced by their misconceptions and disturbing emotions, and so remain trapped by them. Yet their fundamental wish is just like ours. They want to be happy and not suffer. So the idea is that instead of pinpointing faults and mistakes and shortcomings and things people are doing wrong, and being critical about that, we still acknowledge, okay, this person is yelling at her kids, or this person, is falling over because they had too much to drink or whatever. So we're not kind of blind to the problems that are there. But instead of being critical and judgmental, which is a kind of aversion, that's related to that particular mental state of anger, hatred, aversion. And also arrogance. There may be, I think, usually some arrogance there, as if we're holding ourselves in a superior position. I'm not like that. Look at that person. So we feel superior to them and in a position to judge them, look down on them. So that's often involved as well. So instead of getting into that frame of mind, having compassion, recognizing, to be able to have compassion, it's helpful to understand how the mind works, how people do get into problematic situations, like a person who's had too much to drink or is using drugs, how people get into that. They probably had lots of problems in their life. Maybe they were introduced by others to this particular behavior. They got addicted, and once you're addicted, it's so hard to change. And then, knowing about the mind and the afflictions in the mind, greed, hatred, ignorance, and how everyone's got those in their mind, and it's very hard to be free of them. So just being able to analyze, especially from a Buddhist perspective, but it doesn't have to be the Buddhist perspective. There could be other perspectives as well that enable us to have compassion for the person, understanding how they are suffering, and by their behavior, they may be creating even more suffering for themselves and for others, and just letting that move us. We have this lovely expression in English, having a soft heart. A soft heart. I've been thinking about that recently because I can feel it in myself. Sometimes my heart is soft. Sometimes it's hard. So compassion is like having a soft heart. You're concerned about the other person. You recognize they're unhappy, they're in trouble, they're suffering. And you, instead of being hard and cold and judgmental, critical, you feel soft towards them. And it's a much nicer feeling, Having a soft heart feels so much better than having a hard, closed, tight heart. So knowing how to cultivate compassion enables us to have a soft heart towards others. And there's a reflection here at the end of this chapter that gives us some ideas on how we can change this. So it says, replacing the judgmental attitude with compassion. Here's an experiment to try when you're people watching. Train your mind to say, there's someone who looks rushed. May she relax, be calm, and get to where she's going safely. That person looks unhappy. May he be well and happy. That's loving kindness, metta. So if you see someone looking unhappy, wish them to be happy. Wish that whatever is causing them to be unhappy will change. They'll be free of that, and they'll be restored to a state of happiness and well-being. She looks flustered. I hope she regains her confidence. Those kids are giving their parents a hard time. May that family be harmonious and help one another. In other words, look at them with tolerance, understanding, and compassion. Training your mind in such thoughts may seem artificial at first, but after a while your compassionate thoughts will flow like a gentle river, connecting you with others and with your own kind heart. So that's something you could try between now and the next Sharing the Dharma Day, which will probably be in the springtime. Got lots of time to practice. Yeah. Any questions or comments or things you would like to share?
Buttons on. Okay. I just wanted to go back to something that you said in the beginning, and I get that the teachings on impermanence and emptiness are, and I do actually find them helpful. That said, I also feel like, and I also could see that how being in despair and despondent, being paralyzed with worry and fear, that sort of thing, is not helpful for us or others, actually. But I also felt like, given the circumstances and the situation, like I feel like I have to allow myself to be sad. Like it's perfectly appropriate, actually. It's just human, I think, to be sad. And my understanding is even His Holiness will tear up occasionally when he talks about his mother. So I just was wondering if you can address that part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it can sound a little, and I was giving a talk yesterday morning to another group, and this similar question came up. Yeah, it can sound sometimes like we should just shut off our feelings or deny or suppress feelings of sadness or fear or whatever they may be. Like you're not allowed to have those feelings. It can sound like that, but I don't think that is correct. I think that's a misunderstanding. Like you say, I've seen the Dalai Lama cry in front of thousands of people. And so he's very human, which I find wonderful and refreshing. He's definitely a human being with human feelings, both laughter and tears. So I don't think that is correct. And I think all of us here, there are moments when we are feeling sad. We are feeling sad. We are feeling worried. But we're just trying not to let ourselves get totally, overwhelmed by those, such that you can get kind of paralyzed with those feelings if you don't know how to deal with them. So I think it's a balance of, acknowledging, accepting, allowing those feelings to be there without, getting carried away or drowning in them, such that you can't do anything. Because there are things that need to be done. And so we need to keep a certain amount of mental balance and composure to be able to carry on with our life. And also those feelings give us energy. I'm just so amazed, so impressed by the people who are going out sometimes every day. And sometimes, again, searching places that have already been searched. Well, maybe there's, this and that. So it gives energy to keep going and keep doing whatever can be done to find a solution, to solve this mystery, to find Geshe-la. So that's a good point, and it's good that you brought that up because maybe other people feel that way as well. Sometimes, when we look at a statue or an image of the Buddha, and the Buddha always looks so calm and serene, and we may get this idea that, oh, if you're a Buddhist, if you're a follower of the Buddha and you're following this path, you have to look like that too. You have to always be smiling and calm and serene, and there's no place for any other kind of emotions. The Buddha, he wasn't always the Buddha. He was an ordinary person too, so he went through all these emotions, but he found a way of rising above them and reaching a state of real peace. But he certainly understands how we feel, and nobody's going to condemn us, scold us, get angry at us for having human feelings. And so there's lots of methods in Buddhism for how we can work with our own emotions. Sometimes we may not be able to do that. Sometimes you just keep going around and around in circles and you can't find a way out. And it's fine to ask for help from a teacher or a fellow practitioner or even a therapist. So that's completely fine.
One thing that helps me in this is exercise that Tenzin Kacho taught us many years ago at DFF. And it was from a book by Ken McLeod, where it helped me to realize that they make it like three choices. You can suppress emotions, you can express them, or you can be aware of them. And in my life, up to that time, I would wallow a lot in emotions, or I would suppress them. So for me, wallowing was like a level of expression that was not really useful or helpful. And the suppression also got me into trouble. And so, the unhealthy psychological suppression isn't so helpful, and it's not advocated. But this idea of just holding things with awareness and allowing myself, and I have to do things so that I will feel things, like I can go right into functional mode, but I know that about myself. And so I make time for myself. And I had to learn this intentionally, actually with guidance, actually from a therapist at one point, to learn how to make more time to allow the space in my mind to allow myself to feel everything, but then not to be overwhelmed, so it's kind of like so I think that's a very helpful model for me, and it also, the thing I liked about it was I didn't know how to regulate it yet, and this exercise helped you to regulate it because you did breathing meditation for like 10 minutes. Then you would ask yourself what's there, which was helpful for me because I was suppressing things. And then 10 more minutes of breathing meditation. And one time I explained this to Venerable Chodron, I said, well, that never really works that way for me, but it did help me a lot. And she said, well, that's because you don't have very good control of your mind, which was absolutely true. But I said, I don't really care, because what's working for me out of this is that this exercise helped me tremendously because what I found on the cushion is that when I allowed myself, I'd relax the mind, get it calm through breathing meditation, and then what's there gave me the space to kind of explore difficult situations and what was my internal world around that. But then what would happen is I'd get, like, the reason I was suppressing things, because I would get overwhelmed by them. And then the instruction is to go back to the breathing, because you're like falling off to one or the other. And that really helped me a lot. I mean, I definitely still use that for many years. And that it was a kind of a simple exercise, and I wasn't so good at it, obviously, but it did help me with what was my, the thing I was having difficulty with. So I kind of hold that as, I'm going to feel a lot of emotions around what's happening, but I don't want to be dysfunctional with it all. And either one of those extremes leads me to some level of dysfunction.
Someone online asks, there are 2 bodhisattva precepts that concern belittling. How would you relate being critical and judgmental to belittling?
I can't recall offhand which bodhisattva precepts do they... Yeah. Yeah, I think the first of the, the root bodhisattva precepts, praising yourself or belittling others. I think in this case it's more when you're expressing criticalness. So, for example, as a Dharma teacher, if I sit up in front of a group of people and talk about my good qualities, and then I talk about somebody else's, like another teacher, oh, they're not like this, they're like this, da 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 da. So I think it's more that kind of context where you're, putting yourself up and putting down someone else, and it's due to attachment to receiving material offerings, praise, and respect. I want people to honor me and praise me and give me offerings, and I don't want this other teacher to get them. So it's pretty gross. But I guess, it can happen. Some people may do that. So, yeah, it is, I think, belittling in this case is the same as criticism, criticalness. And then, I think there was a secondary, I don't remember which number it was, but a secondary one, which is similar, but I think the motivation was a different one. Do you remember which one it was?
Where it is it under the fortitude ones? Look in there. Yeah, that's anger. The anger ones.
This one about criticizing the teacher.
Mm-hmm. But I think in general, as Bodhisattva, for following the Bodhisattva path and keeping Bodhisattva precepts, we should try to avoid criticizing others. And it's often to try to stop the mind from having critical thoughts, that's very, very difficult. But at least try to stop expressing critical words towards others.
This might be a little bit about what you've already talked about, but one of the things that I reflect on, and I would love it if you would chew on it a little bit more for us, is at the end when you were reading Venerable's meditation, we were talking about how we can look at somebody and say, it seems like you're hurrying, this might be another strategy, or working with our mind. So my ponderance is, how can I work my compassion without projecting stories onto others that may have some sort of critical underpinning, or even just a projection when it's really my own stuff?
I guess, especially with the strangers, we're just observing people in a shopping mall or whatever, and we don't really know them and know what's going on with them. I just remember once popped into my mind a mother with a couple of young kids, and one of the children was just having an absolute tantrum, just screaming. And I think the mother also got quite upset and was treating the child a little roughly. So it was quite an unpleasant scene to observe, and I'm sure everybody all around was also aware of what was happening. So a situation like that, I mean, you don't have to get into a whole story, but, just to avoid having a critical mind, like thinking, oh, what a, whatever, some nasty word or nasty comment that might pop up in your mind. Just to think, wow, how wonderful it is that she's taking on this role of being a mother. It's not easy being a mother, and you don't have control over your kids. Sometimes out of the blue, they just go into a tantrum, and how painful that is for her. And, may she find the fortitude, the courage, whatever quality she needs to be able to carry on and, be a good mother to her children, and may her children also calm down and be more manageable. So yeah, I don't think you have to go into a whole story and try to imagine what's really going on with her, but just from what you observe, use that to generate compassion. You could also think of some situation where you may have had yourself similar to that. Then you can empathize. Yeah, I know what that's like. Again, you may not be sure. It's still kind of a story, but just enough to soften your heart and have compassion and generate good thoughts and good wishes for the person. Last one.
Sorry to double dip. I feel like judging, like using wise discernment is actually important. So like that way I know what I can decide what's virtuous and non-virtuous, that type of judging. But one thing I really struggle with is like certain political candidates who, like, the prospect of them being, another 4 years, especially after their language has gotten more, dangerous, and talking about people as vermin and the kind of things that Hitler would say, very dehumanizing. Like, I find that really, really troubling. Like, just the prospect of this person being in power again for 4 more years. So it's hard for me not to, like, I want to judge and discern and say, yeah, that's not good behavior. But there's a part of me that wants to go, I want to kind of talk about them in a harsh way. And it's not easy not to do that.
So is that a question?
Registered above.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I guess my method is just avoid. I don't read the news about this person. I don't want to know what they're doing, but that's not so good either. It is good to know what's going on and be aware of potential problems and then do what you can without going to an extreme of, speaking harsh words. So I guess, it could be challenging, especially you're out there in the world. We're a little bit, in a cocoon here. Although there is, we do sometimes talk about what's going on in the news and in the world and in the government. But I can't really offer advice there. As a Buddhist, with our precepts, we do want to avoid speaking harsh words and even having hateful, negative thoughts. So trying to find some other skillful ways of alleviating the situation, remedying the situation that don't go into the area of non-virtue.
And inflaming others, that's the danger with that.
Inflaming others. Yeah, because if you speak something critical and harsh, then,
We've got too much inflammation in this country right now, to put it mildly.
Sorry?
We have too much inflammation in this country right now, to put it mildly.
The world needs love, compassion. Yeah. So,
is it correct, or I don't know, to think that when we are given difficult situations, a lot of it is because of our past karma, and we are going through these difficult situations to clear bad karma and learn from them? So that's my first question. So sometimes, is it appropriate to look at something that's hard as, okay, I got here because of my karma, and it'll take some good karma to get out of this? Is that a correct way to look at it?
that is one of the thought transformation methods, is to think, okay, that it's my own karma that is ripening in this situation. By going through this situation, I'm actually lessening. My karma is getting purified. And so that can give you some good feeling. And also use it as a lesson, like to think, okay, what what I did to get here, I must have done something harmful. So I don't like this kind of situation. I don't want this to keep happening again and again. So I really have to make sure I don't keep creating that cause again and again. So it gives us a strong impetus to work on our karma, create good karma, avoid bad karma.
Thanks. So with that in mind, somebody at some spiritual discussion I was at mentioned one of the worst people in history whose name, we would all go, yeah, that person was one of the worst people in history, did so much harm and caused death and misery for millions and millions of people. And his legacy is still going on today. Made this point that they actually created an opportunity for millions of people to have their karma ripen so that millions of people could go on to a higher state of consciousness because of the suffering he caused and the ripening of their karma. They were actually able to progress. Do you think that's a possibility, or is that...
That's a little dangerous. My take on that is, to think that way. I mean, it's possible that some of those victims, some of those people who had so much suffering grew from that and benefited from that, but probably a lot did not. And so it's certainly that should not be used as any kind of justification.
Oh, and I don't mean as a justification. I'm also, I mean, at the point I thought, well, maybe that would help me have some compassion towards the person that caused the suffering. So, no, I'm not justifying that in any way. It was just something that I've always been perplexed about since I heard it.
Well, I mean, it can be helpful to think that way, that, the victims, the people who suffered so much in such a situation, that there may have been some benefit to them. Some of their bad karma may have gotten, maybe they were able to generate a lot of compassion and wisdom. And that, I think that's true. Some of the stories that I've heard of people who were in concentration camps, for example, that they were like saints. And so that is possible, but certainly that doesn't justify any kind of behavior like that. And we do need to have compassion for those who do horrific things, but also know that they did create a huge amount of negative karma, and now they're probably suffering, and they'll probably suffer for a long time to come as a result of that. So that's the usual line of thought for generating compassion for someone like that.
Because it's very hard to have compassion for someone that caused so much suffering in the world. I mean, but then again, we're talking about being kind and being compassionate and being non-judgmental and not having aversion, even for the political situation in the world today and some of the people that are causing some of the things. I find it also difficult to be compassionate and not get a little angry at them.
It is hard. One of my teachers mentioned hearing of a Tibetan Lama who would cry tears of compassion whenever they thought about Mao Zedong. And Mao Zedong, did a huge amount of horrific things, responsible for a huge amount of suffering and death, especially for Tibetans. And so obviously that Lama had been doing a lot of meditation, a lot of contemplation of the, how Mao Zedong got to where he did and what he did, and how he's probably suffering for a long, long time as a result of what he did. So it shows that, if we really continue contemplating those kind of points, it is possible to have genuine compassion, or even crying out of compassion for someone who did horrific things. But not easy, and does take time. By the way, this is Geshe-la's brother.
Yes, I want to, first of all, before I ask my question, I want to take this opportunity to thank all the Dharma friends who are here for your support and for your moral, physical, as well as for giving your time and so on in supporting this particular community, and recent happening with my brother. All the support that you gave, I really want to take a note of appreciation and deeply, deeply thank you. Now, my question is, I work in an academic institution, and has been so many years. So I have been struggling with one concept of staying neutral versus silent, especially when it comes to campaigning and signing or not signing a petition, this way or that way. If you don't sign, people know that he has not signed, and people are grumpy about you. That means he's siding this way. If you don't sign also, you're being noted. If you sign also, you're being noted. So these days, even staying neutral seems like you are by nature of that particular situation, you are earning enmity. Enmity. People feel bad about you just because you stay neutral. So what does Buddhist teaching say about staying neutral versus silent, and maintaining? How should we balance this? Because you got to stay. I got to face the situation, because particularly in a highly intellectual academics institution where everything is very sharp. Enmity is very sharp and subtle. Mm-hmm. Friendship is also very sharp and subtle, can be very fickle at the same time. So I'm not a practitioner, but I have studied Dharma a lot. So when I try to apply Buddhist concepts and things like this, under such situations, especially my subject that I teach being very isolated, what we call is least taught languages, and I belong to, as you can see, just from face, I am different, right? So my question is, how do we tackle such situation when we go through difficulties of being neutral or silent? I gave the example of signing or not signing a campaign.
I'm not really sure if there's a specific Buddhist teaching about that, but I just recall a couple of times in the Buddha's life. One time there were two groups of monks who were kind of fighting, not physically, but I don't know, they were arguing over some point of the doctrine or some point of the Vinaya. And so there were these two camps that were really hostile to each other, and it was causing a lot of disturbance in that particular community. And the Buddha heard about this, and he went there and he tried to talk to these monks and get them to, stop this conflict. But they didn't listen to him. Just kind of like, huh? He's their teacher. But they still didn't, they continued their quarrels. He did try. And then, after a while he gave up and he went off into the forest and stayed by himself. But at least he tried. So it isn't that he just said, oh, well, let them work it out. I'm not going to get involved. So he did try to, I don't know, he probably didn't take a side. I can't remember the details of that. It's not that he said this side is right and this side is wrong, but he just encouraged them to work out their differences and stop quarreling. And there was another occasion when there were his clan, the Sakya clan and another clan were arguing, and they were about to go to war. They were picking up their weapons and they were going to fight each other over some rights to the river. Then again, he went there and talked to them, and he was able to appease their argument, and they put down their arms and so on. So I think those show that the Buddha, he certainly took a stand in the sense of wanting to appease conflicts and arguments between people. So it's a little similar if there's a petition. I guess it depends on what the petition is about. But, And I also remember back in the 60s and 70s when the Vietnam War was going on, And there were a lot of protest, and there was a kind of saying, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Do you remember that? Meaning, if you remain silent, don't say anything, you're sort of contributing to the problem.
That's the problem. That is the problem. That's what people say. You stay silent, silence is a speech. Silence is a message. That means you are contributing to a big problem. So it's very difficult to maneuver in a humanistic way. Even if you feel like I am maneuvering in a way that is not partisan to this or that side by keeping silence, people would interpret that in such a way that your silence means you're speaking. Because silence is the best speech, strongest speech. Your silence is a message. And so difficult to maneuver, so difficult to say no, so difficult to say yes, We come across such situations, especially today. Yeah.
Especially when
In the colleges.
I think we should probably stop. Yeah. There will be discussion in the afternoon, right? So maybe some of these points can be discussed further during the discussion period. But yeah, we should stop. So we'll dedicate the merit of this session of meditation and teaching.
Thank you, Venerable. So now we can all stand as Venerable Khadro leaves the room. And for those online, please stay with us. We have a short announcement. So now Dan would like to address the group. Dan, you can come up. Thank you.
Just want to take a brief moment of your time before lunch here, and just share something with you. Maybe 3-4 weeks ago, I just found myself in a not so good place spiritually, mentally. Just my emotions are very roiled up, and I was just, we had a very busy and hectic summer and autumn, my wife and I, and just things were really difficult. And I just, I felt like maybe my practice was probably being neglected a little bit. And, but I just realized Abby's having a retreat. It would be helpful if I just got my butt up here. So, and I did actually. It was for a Nyingyi retreat, and it's a very powerful retreat, and I'm so glad that I did. And it was so helpful. I can't even begin to say how much it meant. I remember driving home just with a lot of gratitude in my heart, and just, just appreciation for how helpful it was to get back to my spiritual center and, that sort of thing. So the reason I mention this is because, it's so easy for me to take the Abbey for granted, and as close as I live, and I do sometimes. But for those of you who may be new here or don't know, the Abbey does operate on an economy of generosity, and so that means everything that the Abbey has, from the clothes to the food to everything, the gas in their cars, has been donated by the outside community, because the monastics don't work. They're here to work full time on their minds and offer the retreats that we come to, that when we need our spiritual sustenance is there. And that's so, and to me, that's invaluable. Like I can't even put a price on that, actually, but it does also inspire me to want to give back in any way that I can. And so there is ways to do that. Offering service is one way, although that is going to be winding down as they head into the retreat. But there's other ways to give back, and through material contributions or financial, and there's ways to do that. And even so I would just ask you to consider doing that to support what the Abbey does, who they are. The Abbey does prison work, which benefits over 1,000 guys on the mailing list. That's invaluable. The new Buddha Hall, and there's so much that the Abbey does. The teachings are freely given. They don't charge for any of this. So to me, like I said, I personally, I feel like these teachings are priceless in my life. They've made such a huge difference. And if you feel inspired, help out if you can. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.